At this point, the Liverani family have just arrived in Sydney and have boarded a train bound for Gulawabbalong, that is Wollongong. Mary Rose and her sister Margaret are sitting in a carriage opposite an Australian man who is probably the first Australian they will have spoken to when they start speaking to him. Though it was getting dark, we could still see out of the window. Margaret had the window seat, so I watched from crab eyes the man sitting opposite us. He wore a cardigan and hat. The skin on his face looked rough and tough, and he had thin, drained lips. He sat with his knees spread open and his hands hanging between them, the fingers tapping each other restlessly. A few minutes after the train left the station, he tapped his fingers together with a last flourish, one after the other, as if he were running them down piano keys, and leaning forward said, "You kids mind if I smoke?" Well, I nearly died. To ask us if we minded anything. The only time that was ever said to us was in the tone that meant, "Quit it or I'll punch your nose." "Do you mind?" with a filthy look, meaning I blooming well mind what you're doing. Margaret didn't hear him, but I said, "Good heavens, no." He dug around in the pocket of his cardigan and drew out a blue cellophane packet. I recognised it. It was a shag bag. And sure enough, he opened it and took out a packet of cigarette papers. He tipped some shag along the fold of a smoothed out paper, shaking it a bit to even it out. Then he licked the edges of the paper and stuck them together. Some shag was hanging out both ends, so he nipped it off with his fingernails. They were black and long. Margaret had turned away from the window and was watching him, the same as I was. "Hey, mister," she said, embarrassing me and breaking the golden rule of silence with strangers. "My father's got a wee machine for doing that. It makes the cigarettes even all the way, and they don't have wee bits hanging out the end." The man tugged a few more threads of tobacco and lit the cigarette before he acknowledged the speech. "Is that a fact?" "My word." The man smiled with his eyes, though the rest of his face was quite still. "Well, that sounds like a very fine machine. Very fine. But you see, I'm not all that keen on mass production. I like all my smokes to taste different, see? It's like having a cup of tea. Even with the same brand, you can get a lot of different tastes. It depends on how you make it." We sat thinking. It made sense. Then the man spoke again. It was clear he felt comfortable with us now. "Where are you kids going?" "Gulawabbalong." "Nice town. Lots of beaches. And steelworks for making money." He flicked some ash onto the floor. "Dirty thing. Palms, aren't you?" "What were palms?" Margaret never liked to show her ignorance. "We're Protestants," she said. It was a useless attempt. I could see by the quick flicker of the man's lips that she said something stupid. He tried to cover it up. "Then you're Protestant palms." There was little point in going on with this game. It was like 20 questions. So I confessed we weren't familiar with the word. "Palms are short for pommies. People from England." "From England or Britain?" I asked quickly. He shrugged his shoulders and stared out of the window. "What's the matter? They're all the same." Then he saw by my face I was annoyed and added, "It's the English, really. They're the pommies." "Well," I said, "we're Scottish, and there's a big difference, you know. But you haven't told us what pommy means." He tapped his teeth with his long fingernail. "I don't really know, kid. Something to do with the skins." "But is it good or bad?" I persisted. He shook his head from left to right in a negative gesture. "Bad. It means I don't like you, mate." Then he changed the subject, wrenching it out of its ugly shape. "What do you think of the bush?" I felt anxious to please him somehow, so I looked along his wiggling fingers that pointed outside the window and tried to single out particular leaves. It was impossible. "Which one?" "Which what?" "Which bush?" Oh dear. It was easier to talk broken English with Frank, the Italian fish shop owner. The man was exasperated. He made a queer sound in the back of his throat and withdrew into himself. His lids, drawing down over his eyes, said, "The end." And I folded my hands together on my lap, irritated because I didn't know what I'd done to be so annoying. From time to time, I looked over at the man. A fine dark glitter, sharp across his face, told me his eyes weren't perfectly shut. But he was sleeping, quietly soughing through his teeth. I nudged Margaret. She was dozing with her cheek on the hand that rested against the glass. "That man," I whispered, trying not to move my lips. "That man is queer." She didn't answer.